about Ben Wallace?
Can control a whole basketball game just by rebounding, blocking shots.
Ben's still the first one to be there in the last one to lead.
There's the definition of toughness.
Was I in love with the journey? Was I in love with the game? Or was I in love with the struggle?
Ben Wallace had anything but a normal life and a normal career. He grew up impoverished, living with 10 siblings in a 3-bedroom home. He had to work from an early age picking cotton in rural Alabama to help get by, and has stated that there were days in elementary school that he had to walk to school barefoot after ripping through his shoes. He found success in sports pretty quickly, but his bread and butter was actually playing football. The kid was hyper athletic and it was a good fit, but when his brother introduced him to basketball in high school, it was love at first sight. Ben would run up games with his 7 older brothers who were all taller than him to this date, and would never get the ball unless he did it himself, grabbing a rebound or stealing it, and this quickly became his identity on the court. His passion was real, and he started working to turn this into something. After catching news of a basketball camp held by Charles Oakley, Wallace started cutting hair for $3 a pop to save up money to attend. Wallace ended up saving the dough, and Oakley saw Wallace laughing with some friends during the camp and decided to show him up a little bit. The two ran a game one-on-one where Oakley of course had his way in Oakley fashion, throwing elbows and even split open Wallace's lip. It was very draining, but Wallace didn't shy away. In fact, he turned it up even more, showing the type of physicality that he was capable of right back. He ended up earning Oakley's respect, as he clearly saw a future in the hard-headed kid that shared quite a few similarities to himself, and he served as a bit of a mentor to him from that point onward. Wallace established himself in high school as a phenomenal athlete, an all-state player in baseball, basketball, and football, but football was still where he shined. I mean, he received a scholarship offer to play for Auburn during this time. In a move that really didn't make much sense to anyone, he decided to follow his passion for basketball instead. But he wasn't scouted by anyone. I mean, he couldn't have touched the scholarship with a 10-meter stick. He was forced to play for Cuyahoga Community College in Cleveland. He was a phenomenal athlete, so he did light it up there. I mean, 24 and 17 with 7 blocks is kind of unfair. This guy was uber athletic, playing against guys who were just not in his ballpark talent-wise. This is also where a friend of his, who was an equipment manager on the team, pushed him to take his weight training more seriously, and he took this advice and ran with it. His unreal strength became a defining piece of his game in the future, and this was a milestone in that regard. After 2 years at community college, old buddy Oakley recommended him to Virginia Union, a Division II school in which he would start to ramp up the competition. Ben was a pretty damn good big man when it came to doing the dirty work that wins games, with 14 and 10 averages and leading them to the Final Four. Wallace was a D2 All-American. He was super athletic with a notably hard work ethic and fit as a good glue guy for pretty much any team. That being said, his resume was just not going to be enough to get drafted, and his poor offensive game while being a 6'7" center would have made this kind of a goofy pick, especially given that he declared for the most stacked draft in NBA history in 1996. He of course was not selected, and I hardly doubt that anyone even contemplated it, but he did get a shot with the Celtics Summer League team. They did not want him to play at the 5 or the 4, or even the 3. They threw in Ben Wallace at the 2-guard slot, and as a guy who can't shoot, dribble, pass, or facilitate, it's clear to see why he didn't land a spot on the team. Wallace's NBA hopes were very slim, so he did the next best thing, playing overseas as a professional, before he would get a call from a very fitting figure. Wes Unseld, the executive of the Washington Bullets, was an undersized legend on the block, and decided to give Wallace a shot. The team featured 6 double-digit scorers already and needed some help defending and rebounding, so they found the right guy. Ben had accomplished his dream of making the NBA, but it's safe to say that he was far from the top. He made less than $250,000 his rookie year and played in just 34 games. He had to work for all 5 of his minutes per game this year. But he definitely worked when he was out there. He became a fan favorite with his frequent hustle plays that he was known for. I guess he left Washington no option, as he was placed into the rotation at the end of the following season. He definitely wasn't lighting up the box score or really making a name for himself, but he was doing enough to make himself valuable. I mean, 5 rebounds and a block in 17 minutes, going 100 miles an hour and working your butt off while doing it, it's going to keep you in the rotation. The following year, Washington gave him some big-time minutes and started him pretty often. He really chipped his way as a guy who was dancing on the line of being out of the league to being a legitimate rotation player. 26 minutes a game with 8.3 rebounds, 2 blocks and a steal. Wallace was a legitimate force on defense, and teams started to find this guy pretty interesting. He had a unique game, no doubt. The years of pumping weights clearly paid off as this guy was fucking jacked, and this really helped to guard some of the crazy tough post matchups in the late 90s. Orlando wanted him the following year as their anchor, starting 81 games following a trade. But the real emergence of Ben Wallace happened the following year, after he was traded in a sign-and-trade agreement for Grant Hill, landing him in the Motor City, and boy was this guy one of a kind. His numbers jumped to pretty crazy levels at 13 rebounds and 2.3 blocks a game, starting in 80 games for the Pistons. The fans love this guy. I mean, he was a 6'7" dude who looked like a maniac with his giant afro and a 460-pound bench press, locking down some of the best bigs of all time. It was crazy. It only got better from this point. His numbers jumped to 3.5 blocks, 13 rebounds, and 1.7 steals per game, while his scoring average jumped to an unreal 7 a game. Okay, maybe he wasn't that good of a scorer. Yeah, actually, he was an awful scorer. This year was only his second season hitting 40% from the free throw line, and only shot 51% from the field, which is really bad when all your shot attempts are in the paint. Frankly, he was one of the worst scorers in the league. His only real benefit was his hard screen setting and hard rolling to the tin, but his defense more than made up for that. In fact, he was the best defender in the league at this point, and he's sharing the block with guys like Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett. I mean, these are two top 10 defenders all time, and Ben Wallace was a head and shoulders above them. Wallace was so good defensively and so bad offensively that he was the Defensive Player of the Year without making the All-Star game. It's kind of weird. I mean, he was more than impactful enough. He was 10th in MVP voting for the season, while being one of the least skilled offensive players that I've ever seen. The Pistons made the playoffs this year, and Big Ben was making noise, grabbing 20 boards in 2 of the 10 games that they played, before being knocked out by Paul Pierce in the second round. This team was tough at 50 wins, and got even better after crucial pickups at Chauncey Billups and Rip Hamilton. This is the start of the Pistons saga as we know it. Big Ben was the anchor of all anchors, and let his boys go to work on offense. This dude did all the dirty work, and it was laughable how effective he was at it. 15 boards and 3 blocks with the slowest pace in the entire league, pulling 23% of all rebounds, with nearly 8 defensive win shares. This guy averaged 22 boards and 4.4 blocks per 100 possessions. Wow. Wallace won another Defensive Player of the Year award, and the Pistons won another 50 games before coming back from 3-0 against the Magic in the first. They ran through the second before Kids Nets swept them, but damn, this team was tough as a collective. The following season saw them jump even further. The pickup of Rasheed Wallace dropped some of Big Ben's averages to 12.4 boards and 3 blocks, but Wallace was still the most impactful defender in the NBA, and should have three-peated here, but they gave it to Ron Artest instead. Voter fatigue, maybe? I don't know. But Ben Wallace could guard 1 through 5, and I know some people say that a lot, but it seemed like even the quickest of guards he could keep up with. And the only center he really couldn't guard was Shaq, but realistically no one could, and Ben was probably the best option to do so. His defensive game was unreal. He even got 1.8 steals per game, he didn't lack off-ball either, and was a killer on the weak side. He was a pest in passing lanes, and these guys ran it up through the playoffs. 54 wins and a gentleman's sweep of the Bucks. The Nets gave them a test. I mean, they got them down 3-2 before coming back in the second round. And the Pacers series was chippy as hell, matching up Jermaine O'Neal and Defensive Player of the Year Ron Artest. They shut him down in 6, holding them to just 65 points in the last game before matching up with the NBA's juggernaut. The Kobe and Shaq Lakers were favored by a mile. 2 superstars versus none. The Pistons were not given much of a chance in this series, but holy shit did they figure it out. Kobe was pretty boxed up, shooting under 40% from the field, and although Shaq did have his way a lot of the time, Big Ben did help to slow him down quite a bit. It surely wasn't easy for him. The Pistons took it home in just 5 games on the back of an 18-22 performance by Wallace in Game 5. Detroit put together one of the most interesting championship runs that I've ever seen, and it's kind of shocking just how well this worked. I mean, I really couldn't think of a world where this could have worked out any better. These guys were far from finished too, after another Defensive Player of the Year performance and an interesting season that featured the Malice at the Palace, with everyone catching hands, but that's a video for another day. The Pistons didn't miss a beat at 54-28. They ran through the playoffs before matching up with Shaq again. I will say, as phenomenal a defender that Wallace was, it's a misconception that he figured out Shaq, and I don't mean that to spite him. Shaq's 5 inches taller than him and always ended up getting his buckets. But the Heat were not on par with the depth that the Pistons had, and it showed winning in 7 and returning to the finals with a matchup that was equally as tough. The Big 3 Spurs knocked off the Pistons in a pretty grueling back-and-forth 7-game series. Wallace did his thing with 10-10 with 3 blocks and 2 steals, but hey, This team was still a crazy overperformer for the talent that they had on paper. The following year was the last of Big Ben's prime. He put up solid numbers. I mean, he had the Defensive Player of the Year award on lock still. Realistically, he should have five-peated the award at a time where the NBA sure as hell didn't lack defensive talent. But nonetheless, he won his fourth, tying Mutombo for the most in NBA history. The Pistons also turned up for a crazy 64 wins before the emergence of Dwayne Wade was too much for them. Ben's time in Detroit came to an end, and this also marked the back nine of his career. He kind of fell off the map after this point. He landed a juicy old $60 million deal with the Bulls where he really only had 1 year as an elite defensive option. He was traded to Cleveland in the following season, and played a few years back in Detroit after that, but during his years after the Pistons run, he was really just a role player. Some people like to call him a career role player in general, and to an extent that's true because he was playing and excelling in just one role. He was a hustle guy and a defensive weapon, but he was top 10 in MVP voting for 3 years. He had a star-level impact, no doubt about it. Wallace's role in history has kind of been underrated due to the short span that he was dominant, and in his career, his numbers aren't that crazy nor the highlights. But a Hall of Famer scoring 6 points a game definitely did something right. One of the best defenders of all time who influenced the next generation of undersized bigs, while leaving a monumental impact on an entire sport. Ain't too bad for a Juco guy. Thank you for watching if you made it this far, and I'll catch you boys in the next one. Peace out.